Good morning. It's about 9 a.m. on Wednesday. So, I was just going to post some of these notes for you. I want to show you a couple things in case you forgot. Most of you are keeping up with all your work good, so good job there. Just need to make sure that when you take your quizzes and stuff, if you need to look at the notes, they'll be on Google Classroom, or you can go here to your online textbook right here. There's your login and password. So you can log into your online textbook and be able to find the answers. I put you the page numbers on your quiz, so that way you can find them. I'm only going to go over one section of notes today. It's section 2, the Eastern Mediterranean, which are these yellow countries here of Cyprus, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, all right here. We're going to go over that. It won't take very long, and then you'll have a short quiz to do, 5-question quiz right here. It's open book, open notes, open video. So once you're done with that, you're done for the day. You're going to have your vocab quiz on Friday, so make sure you do your vocab. Vocab quiz will be on Friday. If you have any questions or whatever, just let me know. So let's see here. So here's the Eastern Mediterranean. You can see here, like I said, we just went over the green. Now we're going to go over the yellow countries here. And just want to show you this. Remember, we're just looking at these countries right here. I want you to see how many people have tried to control this place and have controlled this place over the course of 3000 BC, which is what it said, 3,000 years before Christ. So it's a long time ago. So just look here. I'm going to fast forward this. I'm going to go really fast. So you got the Egyptians and the Hittites came in. Then Israel comes in after they escape the Egyptians. Then the Assyrians control this place. Then the Babylonians with King Nebuchadnezzar. Then the Persians. Then the Greeks fight the war with the Persians coming up here. Then the Romans control this area for a while. It's around Jesus' time. Then the Byzantine Empire controls it after the fall of Rome. Then here comes where the Muslims start controlling the area for a while. Still the Muslims controlling the area. Then the Crusades were fought. Then the Muslims controlled again. Then you have the Mongol Empire controls part of Turkey. Then the Ottomans come in and control it all the way up to World War One. Then the Europeans come in and take a lot of it, France and Great Britain. And then Israel in the 1940s, it becomes a country, I'm sorry. And now it's modern day. So you can see here that this area was very very much want to control. Why would this area why would this area be one that's wanting control? Well, its location. And obviously, out of all this place, desert and desert and desert everywhere, having, even up here into Turkey, having this Mediterranean climate where you can grow things and you can have tropical fruits and stuff that you can grow. Its location because of trade. Its location because of religions, which we'll talk about in just a second. Everybody wanted to control this region. So let's get into this. 3 major religions were all started here in this place. Within a couple hundred miles of each other, you have 3 religions that all start and call this area, and specifically call even Jerusalem their holy area. Okay, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all 3 claim Jerusalem as a holy city. They were all started or were prosperous in this region within a couple hundred miles of each other. And we already talked about yesterday, our last class, about how these 3 religions are very similar. They're all monotheistic. They all have same basic principles of their faith, and so they're very similar. So let's look at them. Jews, the Jewish people, claim Jerusalem as their holiest city. That's where their kingdom was. That's where God is their promised land that God gave them to them in the Bible. And so they built this big temple here. You can see Jerusalem used to be all encompassed by a wall, and then you had a temple here that sat where the Holy of Holies was, and the Ark of the Covenant, and all their holy sites was surrounded by this wall here. You can see there. And that whole area, that whole area is known as the Temple Mount. The very holiest site for them today is this western wall. And this is where the first temple was built by King Solomon, David's son. and then was destroyed um, by, I think, the Babylonians, I want to say, came in and destroyed their whole temple, and then it was rebuilt, and um, they rebuilt it, and they had this nice holy site, and it was rebuilt for them, or they rebuilt it, and then the second temple was destroyed a little bit after Jesus died. The Romans came in and destroyed that area, and so the only piece left standing today of the original temple is known as the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, because people go up and pray and cry at it, and so that's the Western Wall. So very sacred site for them. Uh, there's no Jewish temple has been here since 70 AD, so that's kind of the holiest site for the Jews. Then you have the Christians call Jerusalem their Holy Land because that's where Jesus was crucified. That's where he did a lot of his ministry. That's where he rose from the dead. This is what they say is Jesus' tomb, where um, he rose from the dead. And there, I mean, it's a holy site for them. You can see here the Crusades were wars because the Muslims controlled that area for a long time, and then in the Middle Ages, the Christians became powerful again in Europe and decided they want to take this land back from from the Muslims to claim back for themselves because they're like, well, this is our holy area, not the Muslim holy area. And the Muslims like, well, we've lived here for 1,000 years. Really, you can't really kick us out. And so they fought over this land. Muslims lived there. Most of the people there were Muslim, but the Crusades were the Christians trying to go and regain this back land and by fighting a war for the Holy Lands. And then Islam claims Jerusalem as its third holiest city behind Mecca and Medina. Mecca and Medina are the places where Muhammad was born and where he did a lot of his ministry and rose. This is where he did most of his holy sites. And we already talked about Mecca in the last place and the last notes. But the Dome of the Rock is this building here, gold top building. You can even see it back in this picture here. So it's been there for quite some time. The Dome of the Rock is their sacred spot. That's where they believe Muhammad rose to heaven. And so it's a very sacred spot to them. It's also where you can see basically you can throw a stone from the Wailing Wall to the Dome of the Rock. So you can see it's very close to where the Jewish most sacred site is and where one of their three most sacred sites are for Islam. And so it's very much, you'll go through this area and you'll see a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Islamic people um, just in the same area. And so you have a lot of different, and Christians even go up to this place. And so you have a lot of different religions mixing and mingling in this area. And most of the times, um, they're very peaceful and get along very well. But there have been fights here next to the Western Wall and the Dome of the Rock where there's been fights between Muslims and Jews just because they're in close proximity and traditionally don't like each other. But for the most part, Jews and Islamic people live in Jerusalem today and get along well most of the time. So you can see all these religions are right there. We talked about the Ottomans controlled this. The Ottomans were a Muslim-based government that lasted for about 400 years and controlled this whole region here from northern Europe, even over here into Greece. Turkey was where they kind of set up their main place. Istanbul, right here, is where their kind of capital was. But the Ottomans really controlled this area for a while, and they were a Muslim-based government that lasted for 400 years and controlled this region until the end of World War One, because they sided with Germany in World War One. We know how that went. Germany lost, so they lost all their territory in World War One. And so, around the same time that the Ottoman Empire was losing power, the Jews really wanted to go back and claim this land as their homeland. They felt like this is where God gave us our home back when we escaped from Egypt. This is our homeland, and we want to move back there. And so, this whole Zionism, Zion is another word that's kind of referred to the Jewish people. Zionism is like patriotism. It's proud to be a Jew, And so they were proud to be a Jew. They wanted back their homeland. And so they were trying to make this support and gather support for moving back to the um, area of Israel, which was controlled by the Muslims at the time, the Ottoman Empire. And so the Jews started moving to the area. They bought land in here. They trying to escape German persecution because the Germans were starting to come back in power after World War I, and remember how they didn't like the Jews, and so they started to move there to get away from Jewish persecution. And after World War I, Great Britain controlled this area, and so Great Britain started trying to figure out what to do with all the Jews that were moving to the area, even though this area was technically called Palestine, or sometimes Transjordan is what they called it as well. But they were trying to figure out, what do we do with all the Jews moving here? This has been Islamic land, Muslim land for 500, 600 years, even longer than that if you think going back before the Crusades. And so this land has a lot of Arabic people don't that claim this as their land as well. And so what did they do? Well, World War II happened, and people really started to feel sorry for the Jews because of all the persecution, the millions that died in Europe. And so the world kind of was looking at the Jews as they felt sorry for them. And so the Jews, the kind of got Israel because the world felt sorry for them, and the public pressure was to do something good for them. And so Great Britain gave this area to the Jewish people, and they called it Israel, what it was traditionally called way back in 3000 BC. Was this area controlled? And so they called it Israel, and the Israel state was right here. You can see here. The Israel state was established, and that made all the Arabic countries, and remember they're surrounded by this whole land, the rest of the land is Arabic and Islamic, and all the Muslim countries got very mad at this because they felt like, well, we've lived here for thousands of years. How are you going to take land that's ours and give it to people who haven't been here and haven't been their land for 1,000 years? And so all these countries got mad, ganged up on each other. I mean, ganged up on uh, Israel and attacked them the day after they became a country. And somehow Israel won that war and controlled that country today and controlled that territory today. And so you have people on the other side of that, on the other side of Zionism, you have a bunch of people, Arabic people, that feel like their land was stolen from them. And so they founded this thing called the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, were formed to gain the land back from the Arabic people. And so they wanted, back for the Arabs from the Jews. And so they sometimes use political means, they sometimes use military means, fighting, whatever they can do to get the land back for the Arabic people, for the Muslim people. And so um, they call the area Palestine. They don't even call the area Israel. They think there's no such thing as Israel. That's Palestine, and it was just taken from us. And then modernize it. Today, Israel, out of all the countries in that yellow from back this map here, of all the countries here, Israel is doing the best and modernized the best because it gets a lot of tourists there because all the religions. Um, so a lot of tourists come there. They get a lot of money from that. Their location right there on on the Mediterranean Sea, and also because of pretty much peace and stability since World War II ended. Other countries have had civil wars and fighting and instability in their government, and so that has led them to not be prosperous, but they could be. They have a good climate. Their position right there for trade is still very good, and they have some of the best climate in the region, some of the most water, but just the instability in the government doesn't allow them to become prosperous. Though there are some big cities there, they're not as economically well off to do as Israel. And that's it. That's the last of the notes. So, what you're going to have, we'll talk about these red countries next class, but what we'll do, I'm going to post the quiz here in just a second. And so when we get done with that, you're done for the day. If you need anything, like I said, email, call, text me. Your parents might have my number for seventh period class. At least they will. But just let me know if I can do anything to help you. Thanks.